Go back to where? All right, cool. Me personally, I have family back in Jamaica. I could go there, but I never grew up there. I was born in Britain, bro. I was born in the UK. London, born and bred. I'm a Londoner, then I'm British. Wouldn't ever say I'm English, but that's another discussion.
And welcome to CTMC's Girls Who Chat About podcast. I'm Zed.
And I'm Ali. We are two women of colour who tell stories.
We also talk about current events and issues facing people in today's society. Enjoy this episode.
Hi guys, you're about to listen to a collection of perspectives about race.
This is episode 2 of the trilogy, so I hope you enjoy and learn something from all the perspectives expressed in this episode, and be sure to check out episode 3 when released. Thanks.
Hey, what's good? Can't Touch My Crown podcast. Name's Hendrix, host of the No Silicon podcast. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having my voice. Yeah, I mean, in terms of who I am and what I do, you feel me? I mean, I'm a content producer, quote unquote influencer. I host a podcast, like I said, No Silicon podcast. And the themes of the podcast are about self-improvement, self-empowerment, education, enlightenment, and thinking outside the box for everyone. You feel me? Getting people to think for themselves. Yeah, in terms of my Black Lives Matter's experience and my commitment or my influence on the movement, I think I talk more about what I'm trying to do for it as opposed to my positive or negative experiences within it. In terms of being a Black dude. Yeah, so most of the stuff I do right now, it's about getting or gathering people together and I guess educating people. So what I do at the moment is I have discussions, open platform discussions, debates, and interviews with influential people in our community. I have conversations with people that I feel have an interesting perspective on things and people that think a little bit left. Currently on my platform, I've been talking to people about, the thoughts on protesting, the thoughts on riots, the thoughts on looting, and I've been reposting quotes and interviews from people like Maya Angelou, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Marcus Garvey, James Baldwin, and a lot of those quotes and a lot of these interviews that I'm having are bringing out concepts of thinking and trails of thought that look at our current environment and kind of give a commentary on it, but from a perspective of what can we do better? What's the best way to empower ourselves as Black people? What's the best way to, I guess, approach authority without making things worse? What's the best way to instill change, right? Through socioeconomic factors, through education, through workspaces, through entertainment. And so I believe that's my hope is that these conversations and these ideas and theories and concepts can feed into the public, aka the civilian, the average Joe, the children, the mother, the child. And we can start thinking a little bit differently, and we can start thinking about how we can actually fix problems as opposed to just reacting and responding emotionally, So these conversations propose things like active working and active participation in your community. I just recently had a conversation with a guy called Slider Cuts, Mark MacGyver, who plays an active role in the Black community. And he talks about things like giving people early working schemes. So taking children off the streets and giving them jobs in his barbershop, whereby they can sweep, learn to cut hair, basic apprenticeships, etc., and they get paid for it. And that's about empowering your youth. So by the time they get into working age or adulthood, they've already learned things like independence. They've already learned things like how to gain capital. They've already learned things about business and economy, right? And we also talk about showing people how to apply for jobs, showing people how to apply for funding, how to apply for grants, etc. And so things like that, right? So the idea is to bring people together that have those kind of mindsets and to pour those thoughts and theories into our youth, into our people, so that we don't approach things the same way we've always approached them. My mentality at this point in time, considering everything that's happening, is these things are repeated, right? The protesting, the police brutality, the responses, the aggravation, everything has been happening for years and decades, right? But then, as we all know, the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. So everything that I've been doing right now has been kind of focused on how do we get a different result? How do we change not just the mindsets, but also the behaviors of us and the quote unquote oppressors? And, I've just been encouraging that kind of outward thinking, and within my personal relationships with my friends and my family, it's been the same thing. It's been about what is the solutions? What are the solutions? What are the next steps? What can we do? And for me, it's always been about coming together and making sure people are on the same mindset. I push teachings of people like Akala right now, who has a prominent voice in our community, right? He's unique in the sense that he can relate to both, I guess, the Western world, the middle class, the upper class, and the lower classes, and the urban world, quote unquote, right? He is someone that has an active voice in the community. I mean, he'll speak in places like Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard universities, UCL, across the world, the top universities side by side with the top professors. And I push that kind of thinking, those kind of behaviors, that kind of education, because it allows you to ask the questions, what have we been doing wrong? What have they been doing wrong? Not only ask those questions, but also allows you to compare what's happened in the past to today and find solutions. Have discussions with the people that, for some reason, a lot of us cannot actually reach in our day-to-day lives. But people like that have the voice for us. They represent us. They have the knowledge. So it's always about pushing people to gain that kind of knowledge and to gain that kind of representation in our society. We want our society to have maybe 100 Akalas versus 100 trappers or rappers or criminals, And I believe that's the drive, and that's the direction that we should all be going to in order to change, things in businesses, change things in entertainment, change things in food industries, change things in sports industries, etc. Is that changing people's minds? And it's like a plant, right? That's the root of everything, right? If the root is poison, then the rest of the plant becomes poison, and the only way to fix that plant is by cutting it off. And no one has that totalitarian approach to things right now. It's not conducive. It's inhumane to believe the only way to fix things is to cancel everything and start from scratch. No, this isn't Thanos. This isn't a comic. This isn't the Avengers. You get what I'm saying? So the best way to do things is to work on the people that exist right now in terms of mentality and ensure that we're educating the future generations. So when your kids are coming out, you're already reading them books from certain authors. You're already reading things like Dostoevsky. You're already reading things like Natives. You're already reading things like, Alchemist, Pablo Coelho, etc. That you're already reading things that already change these kids' minds. You're introducing them to things like astrophysics really early. You're introducing them to things like yoga and cultural thinking so early. You get what I'm saying? There's a book called The Mythical Man Month by, I think it was Addison Wesley. And it's just the change in your mind. Things like Veda, the art of yoga, the art of altruism, those are the things that, I'm trying to encourage and trying to push to our young people and our older generation as well. So my 2 cents for the Black Lives Matter movement, in conclusion, is furthering people's education beyond what they learn in schools, and then finding action plans within our communities to better ourselves as a people, which can also leak out and feed the rest of our society, not just our people and everyone else. It becomes a domino effect. We know better, we do better, and this pushes society and community into one way thinking, or into the best way of thinking for everyone, right? So that's my 2 cents. So thanks for having my voice on. I'll be listening to this podcast, and I'm looking forward to the things that you guys are doing, and hopefully I'll have you guys on mine, and I'll be able to come on yours at one point as well. Love, guys. Feeling Hendrix at No Silicon Podcast. Peace.
Hey everyone, this is Monique.
And this is
And we are
Upeksha.
the co-founders of Them Power based in Australia, Melbourne.
We're both 19 years old, and we just want to add in our 2 cents about the Black Lives Matter movement. And the first point that we want to make is brown isn't the new black. Just because we are brown or South Asian doesn't mean that we're automatic allies to the black community. And even if some people think that, I'm going to ask them, why do you think that if you continue to appropriate black culture and abuse the N-word? I know a lot of South Asian people my age that think it's okay to say the N-word, but it's not, because you haven't suffered through the same abuse and the same history that they have in order to have the right to say the N-word, And that's not the only problem, but I'm just saying, brown isn't the new black, and in order for us to be allies and help the black community, we need to understand and not appropriate their culture and educate ourselves.
And I think brown culture, especially the generation of our parents, or older, viewing lighter skin as better or superior, feeds into the whole idea of or feeds into us or people from the brown community looking down upon people from the black community, and it feeds into the whole culture of black people or black community being inferior, and in addition to that, I think we also owe it to the black community and the black people, because if it wasn't for the civil rights movement in 1965 in America, then discriminatory immigration policies would have taken much longer to be recognized, and it is very possible, and I think we don't realize this and we're not thankful for this enough, that if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, then a lot of brown people wouldn't have been able to immigrate to Western countries like America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, you name it, and have a better lifestyles for themselves and their families. So I think in order to appreciate what the black community has done for immigrants, because I know my parents were immigrants, I think the least we could do is not appropriate black culture,
and just honestly educate ourselves and just be more wary and understanding and empathetic, because even though the Black Lives Movement trend might be over on Instagram, on social media, doesn't mean that we stop educating and advocating and signing petitions and just being wary of what's going on around the world, and just trying to overthrow this very racial discriminatory behavior that's entrenched in our world. Just because this trend is over, this hashtag is over, doesn't mean that we stop.
Yep, absolutely love that idea, and I 100% agree. This is not the end of the journey. Clearly we have a long way to go, and I think George Floyd's murder made us realize that racism is still part of our culture, part of our lifestyle, and part of especially for the black community. So I think we should use this opportunity to start a journey towards a more equal society, and please you should never just do it in your own way. You don't have to make big never feel that your small action isn't doing anything. Treating your black friends equally, not using the N-word, not viewing white skin superior to skin of color, darker skin. These are all changes that we need, and they're all effective in their own ways. So whatever action you make, just make sure you embrace equality in all of your actions.
I'm George, and I am currently a student advisor. I graduated 2 years ago. I'm black, I'm a woman, and I think the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not really that complicated, but it does have a lot of different factors that need to be taken into account. So I think, of course, obviously it sparked off in the States, right? But it covers issues that affect black people around the world, and across all the diasporas. So, you know, it's not surprising that it's spread out as far as it has. So obviously I say obviously, it's obvious to me. My mum is an American citizen. She's half American, so I have a bit more insight into the American side of things, probably more so than the average British person would. So I can say wholeheartedly, of course, police brutality is a massive factor, but it's really only the trigger. It was only the catalyst for these things, because it is so much deeper than that. You're trying to, you know, collate 400 years of straight brutality and oppression, and then the following century of Jim Crow and you know, de facto de jure rules that weren't just in the States, but, you know, here in the UK as well. So Black Lives Matter, probably for me, it's about leveling the playing field and kind of getting what we're owed. In fact, you know, a lot of people think it's a supremacy thing, you know, or it's just against white supremacy, and yeah, that's again a big factor of it, but there's so much more to it. Alright, so Black Lives Matter, you know, you have this whole ongoing thing with no, but it's all lives matter, and then, you know, versus Black Lives Matter, and really it's a stupid conversation that any freaking idiot should be able to understand, but here we are. So let me give you my stance on the matter. Is, first of all, if you keep saying all lives matter when you've been explained 100 times over, you're a dickhead. But sorry, it's not PG. If you need to like beep that out, go for it. You know, in as simple freaking terms as possible. Or rather, alright, tell me this, how can all lives matter when it's very, very obvious and clear that Black lives don't matter as things stand at the minute? How is that possible? It's not. So, you know, we have very clear evidence that Black lives don't matter in the eyes of, for lack of better words, the system. You know, you start off underhanded, you go through life having to work, and every Black person will tell you this for free, that they know this, and I'm sure other people of colour's family might tell them this as well, but I know for a fact that Black people hear this. You have to work 10 times harder just to get, you know, the same opportunities as your white counterparts. You know, it doesn't matter where you went to school, who you know, or whatever. You have to be 10 times better just to get the same opportunities. Black Lives Matter is, you know, yeah, for one, stop killing us. Like, why does that even have to be said? Stop killing us, stop over-policing us. But also it's the, you know, both the systemic and the systematic oppression of Black people. You know, the media that we've been fed since we were children it's indoctrinated all of us so deeply to fear, hate and deride anything Black. You know, that's why you have these massive movements of, you know, Black Girl Magic and Black Pride, and, you know, your Black is beautiful and love the skin you're in, and that, oh wait, that's a dove one, isn't it? Never mind, but whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you have to unlearn years of indoctrination of things telling you the very opposite of that. It's just, again, one factor of this whole issue. How can you respect, love, cherish and have the best interest at heart for a person when you're taught from your very infancy, childhood, developmental stages, adolescence and adulthood that it's not worth loving, it's not worth cherishing, it's not worth looking after, it's not worth giving a damn about? So I guess for me, Black Lives Matter in particular is just, it's kind of, you know, breaking this down and blowing it out to the open, because you can say what you want, and I don't buy this, you know, we're victims and have a chip on our shoulder or whatever, because how can you say I have a chip on my shoulder when it's just stats and facts that, you know, as a Black woman, I'm more likely to die just giving birth to a child. You know, if I were to give birth to a child, it's, you know, as a Black person, I'm more likely to be, you know, not given the benefit of the doubt, stopped by the police, die in police custody. You know, I'm less likely to be able to get ahead, to get through my education. You know, socioeconomic backgrounds aside, even if you manage to, claw your way through all of the hurdles and the traps, you then got to deal with, unconscious bias and then conscious bias, and then, working in workplaces that are primarily white spaces, or working in spaces that, the higher you get, the less you see people that look like you, the less you see people that, might have your best interest at heart. How can you live in a world where you're just constantly at the bottom of the barrel? So it's difficult, because you're going to get people saying, oh, if you don't like it, why are you staying here? And it's like, well, bruv, where are you meant to go? I can't travel back in time and undo the slave trade. Go back to where? Alright, cool. Me personally, I have family back in Jamaica. I could go there, but I never grew up there. I was born in Britain, bruv. I was born in the UK. London, born and bred. I'm a Londoner, then I'm British. Wouldn't ever say I'm English, but that's another discussion. So Black Lives Matter is basically trying to level the playing field. As long as I live here as a citizen, I have the right to be protected by the systems that exist here to protect the citizens. I have a right to have representation. I have a right to not fear for my life. I don't see why it's got to be so complicated. What is wrong with that? I could say so much more, but it's just, there's also a bit of me that's just like, ugh. The ones who want to hear are going to listen, and the ones that don't aren't, and basically what will happen will happen.
Alright, my name is Kay. I just want to give my opinion about all that's been happening around the world currently. I think the biggest thing that I feel is, there's a couple of different emotions, but part of it is sadness. I'm sad that it has to get to this point for all of this to be heard. I'm sad that there are people that still can't see or choose not to see the injustice that's happening, or that has been happening for generations. I'm sad that it took, the pandemic to remove all our distractions, and it took, a horrible and unjustifiable act to rally the masses to actually shout it louder about all the craziness that's been happening for generations. I'm worried what will happen after the pandemic, when life starts up again. Will people still keep up the same energy when they have all these things to distract them with, with their jobs, with entertainment, all the everything that people dealt with back in the day before the pandemic? I'm a teacher, and I'm genuinely worried about the future, as a lot isn't being taught about the history of how things got to the state that it currently is. So much is not being taught about how different groups of people have been affected by the government, about different groups of people, and like a lot of it is not in the curriculum. There's so much knowledge that's been lost. There's so much that's been lost, or just not been retold. But the ironic thing about it is, how some people say that tearing down statues is erasing history. I find that funny, because look what's being taught in schools. They've already been erasing history or omitting history. A lot of it is just not being taught. I'm happy things are now moving, like I'm not just sad, I'm happy things are moving. It's just a bad situation that got us to this point to actually do something about it or make noise about it. So yeah, I'm happy that things are now moving. Ultimately, I can't say in what direction it's actually going, only time will tell, because I can see that the movement is happening. I'm seeing that people are rallying up, people are learning more about our history, learning more about how things have gotten to this point. But I don't know what will happen after the pandemic. I don't know what will happen when everything calms down. I want things to happen beyond this, because right now we're at the height of awareness. I'm happy to see so many people fighting for the same thing, not police versus black or white versus black, but just right versus wrong. Like it's not about anything except for right versus wrong. I see some people like thinking it's just about race, and race is part of it, but the reason why I'm saying it's right versus wrong is because we know this is the wrong thing. We know a lot of things that have happened are wrong. Like all the injustices, it's wrong. But then people will say, oh, they're ignorant to it, or like, oh, this doesn't exist, oh, all lives matter, and so on and so forth. Where have you been? Like, how can you not see the injustice? It's as if because it's a black skin, people are blind to it. So it becomes a race thing. Why can't you see the wrong in it? So yeah, it's ultimately right versus wrong, but unfortunately it's covered by the black filter. With all this awareness and information, the question is now what? How do we undo generations of injustice? How do we change the minds and hearts of the ill-informed? Because that's ultimately what it is. Like, a lot of people just either don't know, they're using what they think they know. People are led by their environment. If they don't see an issue and they hear people complaining, I don't know if it's laziness or ignorance, people are not trying to find out, okay, why are these group of people angry, or why are they upset about something? Instead, you see a lot of the opposite, like, oh, you're upset, I can't relate to it, so therefore you must be wrong. And you see a lot of people push back on the idea. But, I'm not discounting the multitude of people that are actually involved in this. A lot of people are fighting for the same thing, And I don't want to create enemies. I don't want to create enemies. Like, just because someone has been, horrible or, racist or have been part of the problem, ultimately what I want is that I'd rather create thinkers than create enemies. I want people to think more about, okay, the people around you, people that are similar to you, not just in age, but, that grew up similar to you in the same nation and everything, right? I'm not just gonna all right, cool, they're racist, therefore it's them versus us. No. The ultimate goal is for everyone to be on the same page, which means people might need to apologize and say, okay, I didn't see it like that, so I'm going to change my mindset to be more, to understand the situation, to help overcome this, to make sure people understand that, it's not equal right now, right? I don't want enemies. That's the thing. I don't want enemies. I just want people to come together and be on the same page of what is right and wrong. Okay, because I've seen a lot of reports of viral celebrities coming out from their deepest past being, racist, or they've done horrible things. Okay, and they should be penalized for that. What then? After we've punished them or ridiculed them or let them know that what they did was wrong, ultimately what we want is for them to learn. Same thing with all these protesters, the anti-Black Lives Matter protest and all of that. If all of them can change their mind and be like, do you know what? This is bloody stupid. Let's actually do what's right. Let's actually see what is the right and wrong thing to do. That is my ultimate goal. I want that to happen. So yeah, let's use this energy in the present, to get educated about our past so we can move into the future we deserve. If we can't, come up with ideas for how we can move past this, it's gonna end up in, the regular news cycle where things just come and go, and then the same thing happens again. The tragedy that is happening around the world will keep happening again and again. Let's come up with better ideas using our intelligence, using our influence, using our power. And yeah, I think that's when things will get a bit better. I don't want people to become more closeted with their racism or prejudice, because right now, if anyone was to speak up about, even like high profile people to speak up about, any racial tendencies, they're just going to get written off. And what I don't want is for them to just shy away and hide their racism even more, because all that will do is create just more closeted racists, and that's what we want. We want to change their mind. Let's try and find a way to convey ourselves so that people will understand, so everyone gets onto the same page. This ain't gonna happen overnight. We know it's gonna take a very long time, but it's worth it. Nothing changes overnight, so I'm hopeful that after a few more years of keeping everything on the forefront, making sure everyone understands what we're trying to do, things will change. It won't be perfect, it won't be complete. It's been hundreds of years since, thousands of years where craziness have happened, but there's always still sparks and little elements of those problems. So yeah, that's me.
And this might be a generalization, but actually a lot of people do find that Pakistanis are quite racist, and it makes me sad, man. It makes me sad. And I was speaking to one of my Bengali friends about this, actually, because South Asian community, similar kind of thing, like similar cultures and stuff, and he was telling me as well how mad he was getting at people just like being so ignorant, so dumb to these facts. And he was just like, maybe it's the fact that we were born in South London, but I was like, but it can't be. Like, is that the only reason? Because black people, that's why you're fighting for their rights? That's mad. Basically, I recently watched this Netflix documentary. It was quite big when it came out. It's called When They See Us, and it's about the Central Park Five, as they were known as, and this group of teenage boys who were wrongfully accused of a crime that they never committed, and one of them who was 16 years old, and the saddest part is he only went because his friend was in trouble. So he walked willingly, like literally gave himself up to the police. The fact that he was 16 meant that he went to adult prison, like not even juvie. So all of the rest of them were in juvie, and he was out there in adult prison getting beaten up by grown men, and just being labelled as a rapist and shit like that. So it was actually so mad. And the worst thing is he did most of his sentence. It must have got to 13 years later, and then someone finally admitted the crime. Some guy that he had an encounter with suddenly found God and decided to come out, and then took the blame for the case. And it was him. It was a lone attack, and it was that guy, and the teenagers had nothing to do with it. They didn't even know each other. You're 15 years old and you're getting bullied by the police, and you're stuck in this system where the judge, the attorneys, like no one else is willing to help you. No one's willing to help you, and you're just stuck in this prison now. And this is just your life. Like, it just makes me so mad and angry and sad. But like, this is kind of like, I was watching, so I was like, I really loved it. Like, it was such a good documentary. It was really like, it's really quite inspiring. Like, she's a really good director and stuff. And then I was watching their like afterwards on like Oprah and like some of their radio sets. And one of the guys, Yusuf, he actually studied a PhD, so he's a doctor now. But he is now a motivational speaker, and he was talking about, when they look at us, they just think, people in general as well, because you're so like, in a sense, brainwashed. Like, imagine you're always seeing, remember, we're talking about like statistically, where like Glaswegians are like the most vicious and whatever. All we're seeing on the news is a certain type of people, young, in gangs, this, that and the other. So it's going to make you associate and essentially demonize. This is the worst thing, okay, because this happens a lot, and I feel like people are really like silly when it's almost like childish when they have to demonize another group. He was saying like, they look at us and they just immediately like, yeah, he's a rapist, yeah, he's a, he could commit a crime, yeah, he could do this, he could do that. Whereas, like, actually none of them were like that. They'd never even, like, one of them was 14 years old. Like, I don't even think some of them understood the concept of rape. So yeah, it was really, really sad, like, seeing how their innocence was just taken away from them straight away.
I don't really have much to say about it. It was good to see people coming out about a cause that, is very, has a massive impact on my life, but I think I probably get more value hearing about my experience in general has been outside these events, because this isn't anything new to me. This is like just something I've been banging on about for a long time, and now, everyone's eyes are on it, which is good, but at the same time, it means everything's hyper concentrated, and that can have an effect. The fact that everything's hyper concentrated can have an effect, or a detrimental effect, on your mental health, just your general well-being. So it's been odd. It's been an odd period, but there are lots of positives to take from this. It's bringing certain things to the surface. Not too long ago, I wrote about how this country kind of sweeps racism under the carpet and tries to hide it and pretend it doesn't exist and disguise it and dress it up. But now it's being forced to come out. We've got EDL people on the street, like, screaming their head off, and people, it's becoming harder and harder to deny the fact that, we're living in a racist world or a racist country. And to share one of my experiences in the workplace. So I was working for a cryptocurrency exchange, and it was also they also work in Forex, exchange, quite a popular one. And I was the only black guy in the office. I was the only black person in the office. I was the only non-white person in the office, And it was cool. There's always that, underlying sort of, you're the only one sort of feeling, but you kind of get used to it, especially working in the city. But one thing that kind of highlighted it was, one Christmas we're doing Secret Santa. I had my person to pick. Everybody had their person to pick, and And by the end of it, when we were exchanging presents, everybody got their present except for me, and I was just there like, to be honest, I wasn't even that bothered. I was just like, oh, this is kind of funny. I'm the only black guy. I'm the only one not getting no present. Okay, that's cool. Then I just went back and sat by my desk. If it wasn't for a lady who doesn't even work with me, who noticed, she felt really bad, so she went out and just quickly got me something from the shop. But I would have just not got anything. And we can just, just say it was a coincidence. I was the only black guy, and I was the only person that didn't get a present for no reason when everybody was there. It's just something that really highlighted it. It puts it back into context. Oh yeah, shit, I'm black and everyone's white. And there's this cultural tension. Also, in a different workplace, I used to work with this guy who was kind of older. I guess he was like in his 60s. And I don't know how this came up, but somehow the N-word came into a conversation, and he was talking about how he was like, you know what? I've never actually heard that word being used negatively. Anytime I hear it, like in songs and stuff, it's fucking, it's being used like not as an insult and so I don't understand the big deal about it. And I had to say something, because usually, kind of try and ignore this shit, but I was like, well, why the fuck would you have heard it being used negatively? No one's gonna come up to you and call you a nigger. Like, you're an old white man. Like, it's not gonna be used in that context around you like that. Well, it's not likely anyway. But that kind of put him in his place. But to wrap up, ultimately, I feel like the things that have happened over the last few weeks, there'll be some positive shit that comes out of it. There's going to be some negative things, as always, but we'll try and focus on the positive things more, and hopefully move forward and make things better for everyone and other people.
Hello, this is Zed, one of your hosts of the CTMC podcast. Episode 1, you heard our other co-host, Ali, say her words, and this is the time I'd like to say mine, but I will keep it short and sweet. Being a member of the South Asian community, being an ethnic minority in Britain, racism, prejudice, experiences of racial divide or segregation, or just feeling different and exotic in a place that I grew up has always been a conversation point. But this is a completely different matter in terms of what's happening now in 2020 during a worldwide pandemic. We're also still facing issues that have always existed, and yes, historically we've been chipping away, and ultimately we like to think we're fixing the problem, but the underlying prejudices that people have and the inherent racism, the systemic racism, it's been there and it's not going away. And I think it's just been magnified significantly because of a built-up frustration and resentment, and all the class divides are becoming even more apparent during this time of great struggle, when we are facing an enemy, a common enemy across the world, and it's honestly quite depressing. And I've got to say, my own perspectives of racism has changed a lot, because, for example, at first I was me and Ali had a discussion ourselves actually prior to recording these voice notes for this mini-series, and I was very much for the pulling down of these racist statues, and Ali had a point in that, well, actually, pulling down the statues is one thing, but what's the long-term goal? What's the point? And I was like, no, it's the symbolism, it's absolutely brilliant, and it's something, it's not going to change things overnight, but it's symbolic. But then as time has gone by, I've come to realize it's true. Symbolism is like one tiny grain of a whole beach of sand, and whole sandy beach, and you know what I mean. But it's tiny, it's minuscule compared to the centuries of racism. It's completely it's just not good enough. It's shallow, it's not enough, it's not what the people want. It's growing up in a society as an ethnic minority, and especially to be a black person, and it doesn't matter whether you live in the West or in Western society or not, Western society or not. It's completely down to the fact that people are being treated differently because of the colour of their skin. They're not being measured by the quality of their content or their intellect, of what they bring to the table. It's that a judgment of the minute you walk into the room, just like, oh, and it's an issue within all societies, and it's just something that shouldn't exist anymore. And I can see the pain, I can see the hurt, and you can see the appropriation, and I've had discussions with people that don't understand cultural appropriation, and I if I'm getting exhausted from it, then I can't even imagine what it must be like to face that on a lifetime scale, and to have that passed down generation by generation. It's absolutely exhausting to convince someone who can't see past their privilege, who can't see past their own experience, and will just keep arguing as if admitting that appropriation and admitting that racism exists is taking away something from them. No, it's not. You can be someone that hasn't faced a struggle and still be able to empathize. You can still take a look around and think, well, if actually a lot of people are crying out in pain, then surely that means this is happening. I need to do my research, I need to understand why, I need to read, there's YouTube, if I can find a YouTube video on how to fix the steering wheel of my car, I could do the same thing for finding out what white privilege is. I can find out just exactly how long and how historically how black people have been treated absolutely unfairly. And I think what really gets me is the ignorance, and I'm not even just saying it's the ignorance of white people. I think this is culturally there is a massive divide between people that actively research and understand, and those that can just continue life in that ignorance and that ignorant bubble because it's safe and it's what they know and it's a nice place to live, but it's not. It just means you don't know enough. And I think what breaks my heart is that once you're in a place of privilege, and if you don't have to see the struggle and it doesn't affect your everyday life, then you can just keep living. And it just doesn't sit right in my heart when there's so much pain, there's so much struggling, there's people dying. And this Black Lives Matter movement, it's a result of recent multiple deaths during the pandemic, but people were dying before. I get it. It's just, it's sad that it takes dead bodies, it takes innocent lives for people to realise that it's gone too far. And I think if you look back historically, you'll see an entire pathway paved with bodies of innocent people that have had to lose their life for a struggle, then they're not going to be able to reap the rewards of, and they're not going to be able to see the progression, because we have progressed. You know, we live in a society where segregation is frowned upon, racism is frowned upon. People can, of course they can speak up for themselves, but there's still so much to go. And I get it. I do think this is a powerful moment in time. This is going to go down in history, this moment. But I'm very interested to see where it will go and what long-term change and what positive change this movement will have. But I guess we shall see.
Hi, I go by T Starnay. I'm a spoken word artist, teacher of French, business studies and economics in South East London, and I'm giving you a kind of overview, I guess, from my opinion of the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of what I've been observing and understanding as well, because I think this is a movement that no one's got right. We're going about it in the best way that we know right now, and we're having a reactive approach to kind of such ignorance and such anger across the world. I think it's really good that the pandemic hasn't taken all of our attention, and I say that without acknowledging how the severity of the pandemic. But as we know, the pandemic isn't overtly racist. It's not a situation where the pandemic has purposely chosen more so of a racial brutality towards the BAME community. But what we do know is that the pandemic is shone a spotlight on the racial disparity, but also the social economic disparity between those that can seek medical advice and be able to find themselves with ventilators and being able to not be in positions where they can affect household members because they live in generational households. We're finding that again in the black community more so than the other communities. But what we are finding right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, is this is a direct kind of linear effect to racism, and we do have the resources, we do have the people, we do have the voice, we do have the platform to see affirmative action, affirmative change, rather than we sit back and say, well, this has highlighted a few things. It's highlighted this for 400 years. The difference is we're still arguing about and debating about and deliberating about the scenario that we're in 2020. The protests have been really peaceful, and I say peaceful with hesitation, because there's been so many avenues where the media have tried to really take that away from what the people are trying to protest peacefully about. We've got far right wing parties that are trying to really taint the image of this peaceful protest because of certain individuals and minorities that may have acted in a kind of way that wasn't the kind of agenda from the Black Lives Matter movement. However, I think it's fair to say that we've had subtle racism, microaggressions, and we've been very complacent for so long that dare us act out of character should really be acknowledged, but also be empathised with. I think moving forward, this has shown that we don't have enough people in the boardrooms, we don't have enough airtime, we don't have enough media attention. If we do, it shouldn't just be because now we're in a pandemic, this is the height of a political protest for 2020, and therefore, the black pound is being spent wisely by kind of media, I say moguls, because they don't want to be seen as racist if they don't have airtime coverage on this particular protest. But this is something that's going to continue for months, for weeks, for years moving forward, as we need to unpick a lot of systemic racism taking place in the UK, in the US, internationally, and really break down and make a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with how structures have been created over time, how people have been conditioned to think, to feel, to act, to kind of project their own voice, and maybe have a hierarchy where they sit between them and somebody else. And we need to really take that back, and it's been really pleasing that it hasn't just been a Black Lives Matter movement made by and for by black people. This has been a movement that has been addressed and been recognised holistically by many different races, and that says a lot about the commonality of knowing that something such as this, such as overtly police brutality and overtly racism in the workplace, discrimination, lack of opportunities, lack of or racial bias, all of these have a contributing factor towards what we're protesting for now. And I think it's really important that we continue to make those gains and those marginal gains, and we're able to be unapologetic in the way that we're coming across right now, because we've had to be on the suppressing kind of side of society for so many years and have everybody tell us what to do, how to act, what to say, what to wear, how to be. And right now we're just being ourselves in an environment that needs to hear us in order to understand what they need to do next. And it shouldn't be we are doing all the kind of groundwork, and again it's the structures built up where it's the white privilege are making all the the kind of high-end decisions on a high profile. We need to be at the table rather than just simply on the menu. So I think that's highlighted a lot for the past few weeks. I think, like I've mentioned previously to friends, we've gone from a Brexit scenario where we're looking at migration, and we're kind of having this idea of how do we limit migration, how do we advance economic growth, how do we kind of control the GDP per capita. Then we're going into a pandemic where it's highlighted social disparity and where we need to have resources being allocated in an effective way. And if we do say that, have we got enough resources domestically? Are we always relying on our international supply chain? Why is that broken down? Where's our bonds? Where's our trust with our different economies? Where's our productivity in the workplace taking place? Have we moved into the quaternary technological sector far too quick, and we've got rid of some of our manufacturing plants, and hence why PPE was at a scarcity? And now we're moving into a Black Lives Matter protest where we are arguing something that our ancestors and many people that have blessed the ground that we walked on and we walk on now have been fighting for. And it's annoying that they've been reaping but haven't been rewarded by change and by political action and affirmative action. So here we are in 2020, repeating itself, repeating history, and not in a good way. We're repeating the same narrative, and that's pretty annoying, actually, seeing the same narrative, finding so many dated resources and dated activists that have been saying the same thing that we're having to say in 2020. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that this isn't just a kind of one-time 2020 edition, June edition. This is something that has been historically a problem, historically a burden, historically a disparity, and it's only now, hopefully, with the right people, the media coverage, and the generation that we are in, we are not just talkers anymore, but we are making that affirmative action to make equality simply a normality.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. Remember to go to our website, www.can'ttouchmycrown.com. We are now on all major streaming services. Thank you, and make sure to check out our other episodes.